This is the What About You podcast, and this is my second episode that I'm recording, and we're recording it on the morning after the Super Bowl. Did you watch the Super Bowl last night? It was with the Chiefs and the 49ers.
I did.
I watched the end of it, like the rest of the fourth quarter and the overtime part.
Mm-hmm.
Good, pretty good
football game.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. And anyway, I wanted to know if we could begin it with a prayer, the podcast.
Absolutely.
All right. Do you want to go or you want me to lead it?
Another Lord prayer.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Ghost. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
And I wanted to start off by asking your profession is real estate appraiser. I mean, you're an assessor now, but before that, for a long time, you're a real estate appraiser. So for a young person, you know, who might be interested in becoming a real estate appraiser, how would you go about doing it? You know, and what's the work like in that job?
Well, I can't give you a specific way of doing it because lots of times it's just as you go along in life, like with me, I graduated from Southeastern in 1971, 1972, 73, went to work at the Highway Department. When I went to work with the Highway Department, the Department of Transportation and Development, is when I got exposed to what an appraisal was, because they had to acquire right-of-way, and the right-of-way had to be appraised, and then that's when I got my first opportunity to see what an appraisal looked like. And I thought it would just be, okay, I think the property's worth X, and put it down. Well, it's a little more involved than that, and that requires a little more study, a little more support, because certainly when you go, as it was with the Highway Department, you're going to expropriate, which means that they can take your property no matter what.
Eminent domain, right?
Eminent domain, that's correct. And that value had to be supported, and it would have to be supported in court, because lots of times if they don't agree with the value, you're going to settle the issue in the courtroom. And so it's got to be supported, and typically the way you support it are with comparable sales. Okay, you don't just go in and say, oh man, that's a nice piece of property, I'd give you this much for it. It's not your opinion. It's got to be the opinion of the real estate market that you're dealing with.
Do a lot of people opt to go to court direction? Because it seems to me like if somebody came to me for an offer, the government came to me and said, you know, eminent domain issue here, then I can either take their offer, or I have their offer in my back pocket and I could say, well, let's go to court because I think it'd be worth more.
Well, you could do that, but it's going to cost you money at that point. You're going to have to hire an appraiser. You're going to have to hire an attorney. You're going to have to go spend the time in court. It's going to delay you getting that offer. Right? In other words, they're offering you X amount of money at this specific time.
And it's just market value. It's nothing higher than that, right?
It can, in some cases, no, because here's the deal. Over a period of time, the methodology that went into valuing right-of-way has changed. For example, originally they just said, we're taking this much property and it's too bad. Well, after a period of time of spending it in court, okay, because they weren't acknowledging things like damage to the remainder property.
Mm-hmm. You're splitting your property in half, all of a sudden that rest of it's not worth nearly as much.
Right on the money. That's it exactly. And so now they do what they used to be is, we need an appraisal. We're going to pay you, and it wasn't very much way back in the old days, okay? But we're going to give you whatever it is, and you just give us a value. Then when they started getting hammered in court, okay, that all changed. And that's when they started doing what they call before and after appraisals. the before the taking and after the taking, which would recognize, all right, what's my property going to be worth after the taking? And if, let's say, you got a small piece of property and they're taking, let's say, better than 2/3 of that property, then that remainder, that little small sliver, that value has been diminished, okay? And once that diminished value is recognized, then you can calculate what the damages of the property are. You got to find out you're going to find out what typically those properties are selling for, and then what the value is now that you've already taken 3/4 of that property.
It seems to me like, in addition to that the government should offer, I don't know, at least 10% above market value, because I'm not asking to sell my property, so
right,
there's a loss.
Going there, Max. Okay. All right. If you don't mind me saying Max.
No,
okay.
no, please, that's my name.
Exactly. But no, eventually, real estate appraisals for right-of-way acquisition has changed considerably. They went into what they started doing was the before and after appraisal. Before value, give you the value of the taking, all right, less any damages to the remainder, okay? Now, if they weren't happy with that, in other words, they're taking, let's say, 50 feet off the front of your property, and your property's worth $2 a square foot. We pay you $2 a square foot for the front strip, and then you've got the remainder. But the problem is that was a small piece, and now the remainder is so small that it is no longer a viable economic piece. Then it also almost equates to a total taking. Total taking meaning, okay, it's not worth anything, so we're giving you the whole before value, and we're buying the whole thing from you. Okay? So it has evolved into a little more complicated process.
Another thing I've wondered, and I don't know if you know about this, why this is, but in Louisiana, a lot of times, especially on the North Shore, then as development happens, the infrastructure just gets totally overloaded. And then when they decide, okay, we're gonna change our infrastructure, then it costs an arm and a leg, because everything's developed right up against all that. So why don't we plan ahead as far as like when we're buying it to get-go, buy more of this, say you can't develop within 60 feet of either side of the road or 100 feet. And then that land, if it ever does go to get purchased, you're not, you know what I mean?
Well, I see your point, but here's the situation as it is in reality. In reality, they only allow you to do certain things a certain way with the highway department. In other words, the rules and regs of how you're supposed to appraise for right-of-way acquisition is all they tell you. You get the value before, then the value after. Well, if they damaging it to an extent where it's worth so much less than what it was in the before, then maybe a total acquisition would be the route to take. All right, so you buy the whole piece. All right, you can't do that for every piece of property, obviously, because let's say all you need is if you're trying to make for new right of way, for example, for the interstate. Mm-hmm. When the interstate was bought, then they came through and they had a wide. The right of way area was wide. It was.
But that was the feds doing it, so they had all the money in the world.
And they had the extra money. You're right, exactly right. So, but you still had some damaged properties. Mm-hmm. Okay, and sometimes the damages would be an improvement because it exposed your property to more people.
Yeah.
Okay, and your accessibility to that property was very much improved. Okay. Keep
Do
those.
highway department projects almost always take longer than what they're initially said
Oh
to
God,
take?
yeah.
Because right by my house, there's what they call, I don't know, the Bogalusa Highway. It's called LA 3241, and it's supposed to, I don't know, be finished kind of around now. But then I went and looked at it, and they kind of have some stuff done up there by Talashik.
The bureaucracy. Okay.
That's the nature of dealing with government, I guess, right?
Yeah, it is.
Bureaucracy.
Government has so many rules and regs internally that they got to deal with. That the normal everyday person like yourself, okay, they don't really understand. So they try to solve it, and over a period of time after you see what the problems are. For example, they weren't doing before and after appraisals way back when they first started acquiring right of way, but then now they changed it. And so they started doing before and after appraisals. Appraisers didn't know what a before and after appraisal was back in the old days in the 50s. They didn't know that.
What's the role of environmental impact statements and things like that? Environmental considerations, is that a big hindrance to the development, or no?
Not necessarily, because if there is a hindrance, then part of that highway project would be to cure that hindrance. Okay. In other words, they would include that in their calculating the budget. And when federal government's calculating the budget, they've got to take a lot of stuff into consideration. And typically, they at least in my experience and what I've seen, is that they try to pad it up a little bit to cover those incidentals that they maybe have missed. Because it's not...
And that's probably a wise thing, because even after they pad it up, it's probably still not going to cover what it actually winds up costing.
Correct. Right? And let me tell you.
And it's just like doing a project around your house. You're like, oh, well, you draw it up. This is going to cost me $1,000, and it really costs you $1,600 when you look back at.
That's right. That's right.
Let's see. I wanted to ask about, like, going back to your early life and your parents. So could you tell me about, like, your parents as far as I believe they weren't born in the United States, and just kind of like what their kind of growing up situation was, how they came to the U.S., and like your experience growing up with your parents and your sister and stuff.
Right. Well, my parents, very interesting little history with them. Okay. On my father's side, he was born in Honduras. Okay. Lived in Honduras, but then through, I think, World War II, he was a merchant seaman during that period of time. And during World War II, he was shipping in and out of New York City. When he got to New York City is where he met my mother, okay? And so they dated in New York City, and he got back on the ships and went back to being a merchant seaman again. But I think when he ended up where they were docking was in Buras, okay? He docked in Buras, and he fell in love with Louisiana. Called my mother, told my mother. And my mother her uncle lived on Bonnabel Boulevard, okay? Which is where I was born. I was born on Bonnabel Boulevard. All right. Anyway, my Uncle Romeo said, yeah, this is a great place to live. United States is awesome. Come on. So my mother, who was actually born in Indianapolis, Indiana, but raised in Cuba, with my Uncle Romeo and my Aunt Phoebe and all of them. And anyway, my mom and daddy bought the Bonnabel Boulevard property, which is a corner location at the corner of Bonnabel and Homer, okay? And it was a very good acquisition for them because Bonnabel actually took off like a rocket.
That was just kind of the woods at the time, huh?
It was absolutely the woods. We used to, and I was born in 1947, and I think in around 1950, 51, 52, they would build, for New Year's Eve, they would build bonfires on Bonnabel Boulevard, 20-foot I mean, with center post, and they would burn a bonfire at midnight with a ton of firecrackers all over the place. I mean, fireworks were just not illegal, you know. And
what was Veterans Boulevard like when that?
Veterans was 2 lanes of gravel originally.
And it was no canal. Was there a canal there?
There was a canal in the middle. There was a canal. It was, and then you could walk from our house on Bonnabel all the way across Veterans Boulevard and all the way to the lake. And you go in there with a cane pole and a hook and a worm and catch croakers. That's what I remember catching, croakers, you know. And it was just a wonderful way of life. I mean, it really was. Bonnabel was a great neighborhood. You know, it was...
you don't think of somebody living close to Old Metairie and still living out in the country at the same time?
Well, let me tell you, Hammond, Louisiana, when I moved up here in 1971, okay, was very much like Hammond, Metairie was. It was country. It's no longer country, and which is pretty much the way it is with most transitional areas. Hammond, Metairie, New Orleans East, all of those areas are transitional because people are moving into them and they acquiring their real estate. They're acquiring the real estate. Real estate will appreciate, and then subsequently they'll get old and they'll depreciate. They'll sell and they'll move on to another location.
I kind of felt that way in 1993 when I moved to Baton Rouge. You know, because as you know, I was born and raised in Metairie, so comparing Metairie of like the 80s and early 90s to what Baton Rouge was in 93, I was, you know, it's like a culture shock for one, because Baton Rouge is it's pretty much like the rest of the South, or like the rest of Louisiana to a certain degree. It's, you know, New Orleans area, it's like the Catholic South, and there's nothing else, there's no other kind of place like that. It's a unique that way.
Absolutely.
And so like that's all I had been ever saw. And then you see the kind of the rest of the South when you go to Baton Rouge, and it was a lot more, you know, compared to nowadays. There wasn't all that traffic, and there was just sort of, I felt like I was out in the country, basically living out in Baton Rouge.
Well, and Baton Rouge has tried to retain its country atmosphere. You're absolutely right. When I came up to Southeastern, for example, and was playing football, and a lot of my teammates were from Baton Rouge. I'm going there, had a country twang to that thing. I said, man, you know, this is going to be weird with these hicks. You know, they were country hicks. But anyway, long story short, they all turned out to be normal, like me.
At the time, like...
If you can accept the fact that I am normal. Okay? But,
I sent, like, there was kind of, and I don't know if this is still the case, kind of like a tension, and I think this had been away a long time, between New Orleans and the rest of Louisiana.
No question.
And I think that goes back a long way, right?
Yeah. Oh, man.
Because of the Catholic thing, because New Orleans was the Queen City.
Correct.
And then there's the rest of Louisiana, kind of
countrified.
So all those different things. Yeah, kind of countrified. And maybe New Orleans people to the rest of Louisiana kind of had a stuck-up attitude about the rest of Louisiana.
I experienced it when I came up here to Southeastern, you know. I mean, not so much at Southeastern per se, but with my teammates on the Southeastern football team. That, you know, I was where you at kind of guy, and they're like, what's going on, bro? You know? But anyway, it is what it is, and we're all blended together. I'm great friends with a lot of my teammates now.
That's one of the great things about football is the camaraderie, right?
No doubt.
And make lifelong friends a lot of times, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, your daddy, for example. You know, I wouldn't have known him had it not been for Warren Eastern football. You know, and sometimes I regret it, but sometimes I don't. No.
Because it's like there's a lot of war metaphors in football. In the game of football,
no
right?
question,
and a kind of a metaphor in the sense of like people that if you go serve in a war, you get close to the people in your unit because you're just fighting to survive. it's not the exact same thing, obviously, but you're going through Louisiana in August, hitting each other full speed and pads and everything else. So you're going through a really rough thing that brings people together, kind of in a similar
same
way.
Thing. You're going to play the game. So many times you're saying, "All right, we're going to war, boys. Let's go." And so, that there is that metaphor.
And you do. I mean, you see it all the time. When you get injured. I mean, it's not. You don't. Luckily, it's not like war. Yeah, you get long term, injuries. And I remember my dad had talked about in high school when a guy had metal cleats and stepped on his ankle and just tore it all up, and there's all kind of different injuries you have to deal with.
Oh yeah, ain't no doubt. Well, I got two fake knees, that'll tell you something. But that I also played baseball and I caught. So that didn't help my knees out.
Yeah. And then you jogged after for a long time too, right?
Well, I jogged for a little while.
When I kind of came of age that y'all were running a lot. Y'all were doing Crescent City Classics. That's and this and that.
Me, your dad, and Lester Latino. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you about in high school or college, who was the best player you ever played with or against?
Just mentioned his name.
Lester?
Absolutely. Lester was our team captain. He was a 188-pound linebacker, and he just could pack a wallop when he tackled you. He had great technique, and he had unbelievable work ethic. Handsome guy,
The ladies liked him.
Ladies did like him, absolutely. That's why I hung around with him. I was trying to get some of the spill off, all right? But he was also just a very likable person. I mean, I loved him. I mean, he was my best man at my wedding. Made another good friend of mine, Glenn Matheu, a little angry at me because Glenn wanted to be my best man. But that's another story for another interview.
Yeah, that's the politics of weddings, and sometimes you kind of look back and regret certain things. It's like, well, you can only invite this many people. You wind up offending people who you choose to be in the party or whatever. Max. So I think the less ego that wedding invitees or non-invitees have, the better. It's their wedding. It's not your wedding. You know what I mean?
No, I agree. Yeah. But you can hurt some people's feelings. Yeah. But you can also destroy some property because your daddy can well attest to what they did to my father-in-law Rico Mazzaracchi, for example. Mm-hmm. He had our wedding was in on Southeastern's campus. I can't think of the name of the place, but he asked me. He said, "Look, I tried to warn him. That's I tried to warn him, but it did not work. But long story short, we had a good time in my wedding. And, God, that was in 1971, I think.
Yeah. Well, it was right around the time my parents were married too, right?
Yeah, right. Well, his deal was I made the announcement when my wedding date was, and so he announced his before mine. So,
no, he wouldn't do that, would he?
He did it. Absolutely he did. But anyway, long story short, your mom and dad and Peggy and I, we've been lifelong friends, and no harm done, except to Rico.
Yeah, except to his wallet, right?
Yeah, right. To his wallet, yes.
Yeah, and that it's already expensive enough. Like I think from a guy's, especially the father's perspective, you're like to the daughter, you want to spend. Why don't I just give you this money and you go put a down payment on a house or go take a tour around Europe or something? You want to spend this on one day, but then again, it's like you can't put a price on a memory like that, and it is like a lifelong memory that day.
Absolutely, it's your child getting married. No. Oh, my mother, man, she went over the top, but we had a great wedding, and the fact that Sydney and them had more fun than I did at the after party.
That's usually, I think, like my wedding, I think people had more fun than I, because like I was just sort of in like
the days.
Yeah, I'm in a daze, and I'm also kind of trying. I'm so overwhelmed and grateful for the people that showed up, and I'm trying to make sure they all that I make a presence to everybody that was there, and in retrospect, like I know, like I can think of people that I wish I would have invited that I didn't invite, and I know that later on I realized that, like, even though I hadn't seen the person in a long time before that, I learned that they were hurt by that, and I was like, wow, I really, I'm kind of, hey, you make mistakes or whatever, but yeah, I was just sort of like in almost like a politician sort of mode where it's just trying to like make sure everybody had a good time and dazed at the same time.
Right.
But talking more about Lester, and he's named, his name's on the football stadium over at Pope John Paul in Slidell.
That's right.
I remember him a little.
He's in the Hall of Fame at Northwestern.
Hall of Fame at Northwestern. And I remember early memories of him. He passed away when I was like, I guess about 5 years old or something like that.
That was a heartbreak, for sure. Yeah, an automobile accident,
After the Italian festival or something?
That's correct. He went to the Italian festival.
That's in...
Him and his girlfriend.
Is that in Hammond, or where is that?
It was in Independence, Louisiana. Big Italian heritage in that part of town.
Oh, yeah.
In that part of Tangipahoa Parish.
And Lester was Italian, right? Partly Italian?
His daddy. Okay. On his daddy's side. His mother was from Folsom. I can't remember what her maiden name was, but I want to say she was French. Oh. Of French descent. Beautiful woman, beautiful person. Okay?
Miss Doris.
Yeah, Miss Doris Latina. And also Mr. Pete was awesome. He was like our second father. Yeah.
I remember so well, like after Lester passed, and then for a number of years, Mr. Pete would throw those 4th of July parties. Mm-hmm. Those were the best, like, big parties I've ever been to. I had so much fun with that.
Yeah.
He loved us,
place. Because after Lester died, we became like his kids, and so yeah, he definitely did. We loved him. He's a great guy. And
I remember one time I went on a double date. It's after I was married with my wife and I, and Mr. Pete and Margaret. Yeah. And so Ralph had arranged where we could see Hootie and the Blowfish at the casino in Bay St. Louis. And so I was saying, I was trying to make conversation. I'm a young guy, so I said, so you're a Latino, what's that been like? And he just kind of gave me this look.
Thought you was Latino?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
He gave me this look, and he didn't seem very pleased. I guess he had gotten that a lot over years. I thought his name's Latino. I just thought, that meant he's Latino. But he was like, no, I'm Italian, and I guess he didn't like people making that mistake. I guess people like a lot of times.
Mr. Pete didn't.
Yeah. Uh-huh. He was like, I guess a lot of people that are Italian are real proud of being Italian.
They're sensitive about it.
Yeah,
because they were at one time, especially in Tangipahoa Parish and Independence, they were treated
like dirt.
They were not treated very nice.
And my ancestors lived in Independence as well, right? Do you know that? Mm-hmm. My mom's grandparents, they came over from Sicily area, mm-hmm. and they settled at first in Independence, right. And then shortly thereafter they moved to Bay St. Louis, and then were there after. Right. They were Alessi and De Benedetto.
The Benedettos, mm-hmm. Yep, exactly right. Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, my mother was born in New York, raised in Cuba. My daddy was born in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. Okay? And they met during the war when he was a merchant seaman and he was shipping out of New York, which is where my mother worked. But she worked in the Empire State Building.
Wow.
Yeah, she was a secretary there. And
I've been to the top of that thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You look down.
Been there.
I didn't know I was afraid of heights till I went. You take the elevator up, and it's going up and up and up, and I'm realizing I'm just held by a cable. And even though logically I know I'm safe, I was real scared. And I got up, and you look down at the tops of skyscrapers all around.
Unbelievable.
And yeah, you don't realize you're afraid of heights. Then if you are, you'll realize it real quick if you go there.
Yes, indeed. Right. Well, I was not. It didn't bother me.
Okay.
But but I was very proud of the fact that my mother worked there.
Yeah, that is neat.
That's pretty cool. And you knew my mother.
Yeah, she is a wonderful person. Like I remember so much, like when she would spend time with me when I was a little boy, and
absolutely,
and we'd have wine and cheese parties.
Wine and cheese parties.
I wasn't drinking wine actually. She called it wine, but I don't think I was drinking wine.
It was grapefruit juice.
Grapefruit juice, yeah. Right. But it was still great, like a great memory.
She was a great lady. No, she was a tough old gal for being as delicate as she was, because she was delicate. All right.
And she was Cuban, so.
And she was very
Cubans
No, she was born in the United States, but
I mean of Cuban descent.
Absolutely.
Right?
Oh no, that's exactly right.
A lot of times, Cubans are, I find, are really interesting people. Like I've different friends who are Cuban over the years, and a lady I work with, one of my bosses, she was born in Cuba actually back before Castro, and then left because of Castro and stuff like that. And I just, I've just always kind of like been interested in.
Yeah, that Castro period was not a good time for the Cubans. Even the Cubans that were here in the United States, because Castro was so against the United States, so there was that faction that was for Castro and the faction that was against it. Castro,
What do you think motivated him? Is like the CIA working in Cuba? I know he had worked in New York City, I think, for a little while earlier in his life.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Mac. I couldn't get into the minutiae on him.
Okay.
He was a dictator.
Yeah.
And as far as I knew, dictators were bad.
And that's what communists tend to become dictators, because they have to force you
to do what they want you to do.
Their paradise.
That's right. That's exactly. So and I know that there was dissension. My daddy was for him, because he was a rebel, and he liberated him basically from
Batista.
The Batista and the American
gangsters.
way of life. Cuba was very much like a little satellite state
of the United States.
The United States,
a place that people went vacation from New York City.
Absolutely. And so, but my daddy was from Honduras and very Spanish, and also a little feisty, if you might say. Merchant seaman, just came up tough in his life. He lost his mom and daddy when I think he was like maybe 14. Anyway, he had like 12 brothers and sisters. I forget exactly how many aunts and uncles I have, but there was a bunch of them.
So he must have been one of the younger among the. He must have had a lot of older.
Oh, my daddy
brothers.
was in the middle.
Okay.
My daddy was in the middle.
He was Joaquin Matheu.
Yeah, Joaquin Matheu.
Do you have a middle name?
Jose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember.
Which is Joseph's my middle name, that's Joseph is Jose.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I remember with him. One memory that sticks out is when I was a little bit older, like maybe I was maybe 21 or something, let's say. And then a couple of years, he came to the veranda, and he brought a bottle of tequila, and I found out I like it,
Well, look, my daddy, he messed with my friends pretty good. All my friends loved him because he was such a character.
Yeah.
He was a ladies' man. He was married 3 times after my mother. Okay. And so, Sydney, Bobby Hecker, Lester. He loved Lester. And Lester loved him. And he just.
He had a child when. The last child he had was when he was what? How old?
Oh, I want to say almost 80. Yeah. He might have even been 80. I don't know if I've said that, but he adopted one and he had one.
Oh,
yeah.
And his those kids, they Do they live here?
No, they live in. Both of them live in Texas.
Oh, Texas! I love Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Well, my daddy lived in Texas for a good while.
what part?
Lived in Houston. Mm-hmm.
When I go to Texas, I got my wife's from Texas originally, and then our family's there, and then so basically for like about the last 30 years, like 3 or 4 times a year we go there, and it's always struck by the difference. Like they just do the same things, but do them the right way.
Correct.
And everybody treats you a lot better. I just think people in Texas tend to live at a higher standard of living than people in Louisiana, unfortunately. And I'm not planning to move to Texas because I'm a Louisiana person.
You're right.
But like when I stop for gas or a
Texas,
fast food meal or whatever in Louisiana, I don't get treated nearly as well, or it's not done as well. Then I cross the border into Texas, and it's like, "Oh, how are you doing this morning, sir? Thank you very much." Real quick and just real polite, and everybody's,
right.
And the infrastructure's all beautiful, and the public schools are really great.
Right.
Great jobs there, affordable housing. It's got a lot going for it.
Well, it's such a big state, and they capitalized on their oil and gas, which is something we should be doing here in Louisiana. But it's not happening for us the way it's happening in Texas. And, but Texas has its faults too.
Yeah.
What I've seen in people from Texas is that Texas is so great that they think they're so great.
Oh, yeah. That's the one thing you see in Texas is like the Texas flag is everywhere.
Everywhere.
It's on the cars. People are real proud of being from Texas.
That's
a lot
right.
of people are, which is good.
Yeah, right. There's nothing wrong with that. There ain't no right.
You don't see a lot of Louisiana flags on people's cars.
No, you don't.
I think they have a nice flag, though. I mean, our flag's good, too, though. I like it. Well, let's see what I wanted to... I was just talking about Lester, and I didn't get... so I remember...
All day long.
Even though I passed when I was... even though he passed when I was just 5, I still have a couple of memories at least of him. Like I remember... a couple of things I remember is one time my dad drove up to where he was living on the farm in Folsom, and he had a go-kart, and he let me drive it, but then I just floored it and took off, and so he and my dad were chasing after me because they were worried I was going to get hurt. And then another thing that stuck out in my mind was back when they had Jefferson Downs in Kenner, and I remember... He had
a horse trainer back then.
He has a horse trainer at the time, and I guess we were going to see one of his horses, and I was seated in the center of his truck, and then my dad was in the shotgun seat, and then he was driving, and that stuck out in my mind. And then just like a couple other things, and then I also remember like after when he passed, like at the time you're 5, and so they didn't tell you what's going on, and you just knew, you kind of got a sense that something's a little off.
Is that how old you were when he passed?
It was 81, right?
Correct.
And so I was born in November 75. So
he was six. Huh?
Well, I think because in November it was before November. Right? It was August or October. October, so I think I was about to turn 6.
Okay.
But anyway, I just remember that, and then...
He's a great guy.
I remember them leaving I had a babysitter for when they were going to his wake, and then I remember that after my dad found out about it, he went and bought a rose bush and planted it in the backyard.
Oh, wow. That's sweet. Yeah. Not that your dad's a sweet guy.
No, he's not, actually. So that's what's the strange thing. Not at all.
No, not at all. There's no doubt. No, but, and the thing was, Lester, at least in our circles, in the Warren Eastern circles, great man, great guy. And it was a very sad day when he passed away. Very sad. God, Patrick fell asleep on his lap at the Italian festival. He came and met, he and Susie Corporate, that was his girlfriend back then. They came and met us, and Patrick fell asleep on his lap. Patrick, and that's the saddest thing I mean, Patrick was 7, 7 years old, and I had to wake him up and tell him. And it's the saddest thing I've ever seen. It was just, this is a little 7-year-old boy that was just laying there. And I told him, I said, Patrick, I got some bad news. I said, Uncle Lester got killed in a car wreck last night. And all he did, Max, was roll over and cry. Sad, sad, sad. At 7 years old. But it just tells you how Lester was. He was loved by old and young. Okay? I certainly loved him. He was, I said it in a proud way, he was my best friend, And
they say only the good die young, and a lot of times that's so true.
It is so true. Well, he was a great football player. He was a great horse trainer. He was good. He was good at anything he really tried, and it's a sad thing that the good Lord took him.
Yeah.
And I guess he needed a good horse trainer and football player in person up in heaven.
Well, I like to listen to podcasts. That's part of the reason I'm starting this. And one of the ones I listen to is a guy that is born in Covington. He became a famous comedian now. His name's Theo Von. His real name is, I don't know, Vonkowski or something. But anyways, Theo Von. He's a comedian. And so then I listened to a podcast of his, I don't know, about 3 weeks ago that he had that would really move me. He owned a guy who's a cancer doctor out of like Louisville, Kentucky. But for the past 30 years, he's been on the side. He started this thing where people who have had near-death experiences, he created a scientific thing for them to kind of relay what happened to them. And then he's also kind of corresponding with people all over the world, different religions, different this and that's, about what they've recorded in their stuff. And also with children, that children have had near-death experiences that are 4 years old or something. And I found it really fascinating. They say the people that have had it, first of all, the story is consistent. There's like little variations, of course, but there's consistent that when you're in this situation, first of all, there's no pain, and for whatever reason, I don't know why that is, but there's no pain. You see yourself from below where people are trying to work on you.
I've heard that.
And then you cross through like a kind of a tunnel type of thing with light, and then you're surrounded by like just something that's undescribable, like love, and you interact with people. You're obviously not seeing them with your eyes, but he describes like telepathically in a sense with people that you knew. And he said that basically a lot of times you have the option. I guess it's just for the people that have come back or people that have this situation where they could be brought back, where you're kind of you're presented with the opportunity. You can stay here, or you can go back into the situation and that kind of a thing. And I guess they've all people that have had the near experiences, they chose, I would imagine, to come back. But for instance, like, in people in the Middle East that have a different, religion, or people that were 4 years old, 5 years old, that they've never heard any kind of stories about after-death experiences, and this is what they reported to happen. And they were asked, like, one of the early questions they asked was like, was the mind shutting down at this time, is this the process of the mind shutting down? Could this be a dream? And they're like, no, it's absolutely nothing like a dream. They've had plenty of dreams. It's nothing like that.
Right.
And so, I don't know. I just found it really interesting. I'd never really looked a lot about that topic, but I found it, comforting and faith building, basically, to listen to that episode. I guess the guy's name, if you ever want to listen to it, it's Jeffrey. I think it's Dr. Jeffrey Long or something.
Right.
So another thing I wanted to ask about is, are you into music of any kind, especially like when you're growing up, so let's say 50s through the 70s, or it could be like more modern stuff. are there any bands that you have that have been your favorites, or at least were your favorites, or something like that? Or
Interesting question. I played the clarinet. You know,
so you're a jazz musician.
Well, I like to, not really, but I mean, I you know, and I have one, and the only problem is I don't know how to put it together. So to try it out, yeah.
You think you could still?
I think I could too. I really do.
Do you? I had heard somebody told me a long time ago that you used at the time of the, like, I don't know, after Jim Morris's passing, that for a while you liked the Doors.
I did.
Yeah,
I did. Jim Morrison was, you know, I liked the music. I wasn't too crazy about his lifestyle.
Yeah. He kind of had like a, what do you call, like a hedonistic or a libertine kind of a listyle. That,
yeah.
But I think a
You
lot
burned them at both ends.
Yeah, yeah.
Best way I could put that. You know?
But I think a lot of times,
But I did like the Doors, and I like the Beatles, and I liked, let's see, that era.
Did you ever like Led Zeppelin, or was that after
Yes,
your time?
I absolutely like Led Zeppelin. You know, all of the ones that are
Yes.
still.
Did you like Yes?
Absolutely like Yes. Yeah, you're hitting them all of the ones that I like, Max.
Okay.
Say something about you.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, a lot of the music, I don't know, for a long time now. Well, Led Zeppelin, ever since, I don't know, I was 14 years old for some reason. That's always been, even still today, is my favorite band.
Yeah.
And then I just find myself appreciating a lot of the music from the end of the 60s into the 70s, especially the rock and roll music. Like, it kind of died, it kind of changed after that and died after the 70s, but it kind of reached its zenith as far as, for me, like during the 70s.
Yeah.
Like, I like to...
Always looking for that hidden message.
Yeah.
Yeah. Always
and that's what I like so much about music, as far as nowadays, or a lot of pop music, even back then, music that doesn't stand the test of time. Yeah. A lot of times it's about sex, you know, and which is fine to have a song about that, but it's always just kind of like to titillate, and it's not an interesting kind of a thing. But a lot of times with music, like we're talking about, like Lester passing, when I've had people pass, I was talking about this earlier, a lot of times for me, like a song comes to me. Like one time, one person that passed close to me, and it was a song by Tracy Chapman called The Promise. It's not a very...
I remember Tracy Chapman.
Yeah, it wasn't one of her more famous songs, but... And then another... when my grandmother passed, and I was real close with my mom's mom, and I was listening to a lot of the Angels Flying Too Close to the Ground by Willie Nelson. I don't know if you ever heard that one. I listened to like a live version of it. Oh, it's a real good one. And then more recently, like a song that is sung by the Allman Brothers. Mm-hmm. And so I like a lot of that Southern rock too of the 70s. Right. And they seem like really good people as far as I could tell.
Right.
And so the older brother is Dwayne, and he was, I guess, like in some bands, and then he was like a session musician as a guitarist. Correct. And he was really talented. Mm-hmm. And then he Eric Clapton brought him on, and he played on Layla, that the beautiful second half of it. Yeah. And then they formed the Allman Brothers Band, and his little brother Greg was the vocalist and the keyboardist, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so they were progressing, and they were making some good music. And then I think it was 1972, they were making this turned out to be a really great album called Eat a Peach. Mm-hmm. And then so the older brother Dwayne, he was 24. And he went out to ride his motorcycle on a Sunday morning, and he passed away. Crashed it. And so I remember, like, what's it, the song? Bruce Springsteen has a song where he calls motorcycle a suicide machine. You know, because like so many people, it's so dangerous. It's so fun, but so dangerous.
Ain't no doubt. I had one. And it was not a real, it was a Yamaha, a little small Yamaha. Mm-hmm. Yeah, shoot, I wrecked that thing so bad. So, no, motorcycles and me would not have, I wouldn't be here. I don't think if I had a motorcycle, I would not be here.
So dangerous, but...
You know.
But So anyway, so the younger brother, Greg, he wrote this song called "Ain't Wasting No More Time."
Mm-hmm.
It was about that. If you listen to the lyrics, it's all about that. And so it goes like, I have to try to recite it, but it says something like, "Last Sunday morning, the sunshine felt like rain, but before that, they all seemed the same." And he talks about how basically after his brother's passing, he was in this shock and sort of fog of just the grief.
Yeah.
And then he says in the song, what brought him out of it is with the help of God and true friends.
Yeah.
And I come to realize I still have 2 strong legs and wings to fly.
Good.
And I'm not wasting any more time. And so I think what he kind of came out of it with is like, time is like a precious thing for our life here on earth. And we're here for a reason here on earth, like to do something, to do stuff to influence people, part of our journey. And so it's like, well, I don't know if there is such a thing necessarily as wasting time, but for him, it's like, let's not, let's get to it, whatever I'm supposed to be doing, and live every day, because all we know is today.
Fullest.
Yeah, to its fullest. And that really, it speaks to me. And anyway, so.
Mm-hmm. Well, who's interviewing who?
Oh, I know. I got a little bit of talking problem. Joe Deliberto, when I was a boy, he used to call me the mouth of the South.
Oh, really?
Or he also called me Little Mouth when I was a little boy.
I'm still good friends with him.
Mm-hmm.
He and I teammates at Southeastern. We got kicked off the team together. It's just we squeezed 4 into 2 at Southeastern. But he's a good guy. And
loves his fishing.
Tony Cash.
Yeah.
You got to mention his name.
He played at Southeastern too?
No, Tony played at Aloysius, but he came to Southeastern. And the reason why we got kicked off the team was because of Tony.
Oh, yeah. I spent a lot of time growing up with Tony and Joe in Claremont Harbor.
That's right. Anyway, I love them both.
Yeah,
both of them are great guys. And both of them very good football players. Mm-hmm. And both of them can get you, well, not both, Tony, can get you in trouble and out of trouble pretty good.
And they like to tussle back in the day, from what I understand. Like they weren't taking anything off anybody, basically.
No. And more Tony than Joe. Joe was a nice guy, but for some reason that Joe would get something would just rile him up. And when he get riled up,
Look out.
Oh my God. He hit a guy so hard one time in the French Quarter. And it was me and Joe just walking around on Bourbon Street, and this guy was picking on somebody. Well, so we go stand around, we watching him, and the guy thought it was bad, started going, "Who's next? Who's next?" And so he looked my way, and I said, "Yeah." When he looked
Not me.
No, when he looked my way, I said, "No, try him."
And Joe was like, I'm next. I'm next.
I'm there. And boy, I tell you what, he knocked his eyebrow clean off his face.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a very hard hit.
I remember, it's related to this. So one of my best friends, especially growing up, I'm still friends with his son, Nick Deliberto.
Yeah.
And so we were playing by. He wound up living on the same street that I did on Lefkoe, and then we were on the street right behind it. And I don't know exactly what we were doing that got us. We were with Jeff Draw, and then so some guy, he was living in an apartment, and I don't know what we did or if we did anything wrong, but anyway, he said we had to go in his apartment, and he wouldn't let us out for something.
What?
And so Jeff Gerard, he turned around, he ran back to my house where Joe and my dad were. And so they came, so we were in the apartment. I don't remember, it wasn't any kind of inappropriate thing. I guess we had ticked the guy off. I don't know, but he's like, y'all aren't leaving until, I forget exactly, I was a young person, I don't remember. But anyway, so then, 5-10 minutes later, you hear a knock at the door.
It's
you know,
Joe and
it's
your
Joe
dad.
and my dad, you know, and I didn't really see exactly what happened, but we were quickly just, you know, out of that apartment. And then I remember
The guy let y'all out real quick.
yeah. And I remember my, I remember Joe talking to Nick and saying, he's like, Nick, you should be very proud of your dad because I was able to restrain myself.
No
And
kidding.
it's like, this is a really good progress for me because it took all my strength in order to
Not
restrain,
kill it.
you know, yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. No, but great guy.
Yeah.
Great guy. I love him to death. All right.
All right, let's call it a day. So thank you very much for joining the What About You podcast. We'll see you next time.
That's all.